Well, welcome to the first episode of me retrofying my little pad. And this really is where it all started for me, having a bold feature wall. Now, I'm one for doing video journaling, in case you were wondering who the other Dean is. And this was really interesting to rewatch, hearing my takeaways and feelings from the process of what was only my third wallpapering experience on my own. And it was taken just after it was completed and up on the wall. And today I have 8 pieces of beginner's wallpapering wisdom to share with you. But before then, 3 key questions. Why this wall? Why these colours? And why this pattern? So, why this wall? Well, I knew I wanted to go bold with the colours, and being next to a big set of windows, I knew I could push the boldness without it feeling the wall was coming down on me every time I walked in. Now, why these colours? Well, like I say, big windows, big light, I could go for depth. Now that gave me more options to look at, with a lot of choices. And the strangest thing about this colour is that blue just isn't one of my colours. But looking back, I seem to remember, especially in my awkward teenage years, where I would play it safe with fashion choices, I always favoured navy blue over black. So that's probably an influence. But I also remember the comic books back then, and probably pretty much now, where the heroes' black hair, in fact anything black that they wore, would always have this really cool blue sheen to it, and that really appealed to me. And then my favourite artist, Van Gogh, and that famous night sky picture. I think that probably had the biggest influence of all. Now, knowing I wouldn't have that much, if any, blue in here, I knew also for that reason it would definitely stand out. And having it broken up with my favourite colour, which is yellow, and in this case a dirty golden yellow, I knew it was going to be a win-win for me and the look that I wanted. Now, for the pattern, there were many options I considered and very nearly went for. It took me a long time, this one. Now, I looked at retro patterns, obviously, but they were pretty much too busy, which would have taken away from the furniture choices I had, and it would have just swallowed them up. Big tropical leaves was another. Now that was a big option I definitely considered, and just love the tropical look. For far too many nostalgic reasons to mention here, I'll save that for another video. But again, it would have clashed with the furniture choices, especially my teak dresser. Wait for that, because that's coming up. Talking of art and masterpieces, like the Van Gogh, I did consider one of those. But it would have got lost behind the furniture, really. It would have taken away from the actual image of it, broken it up too much. I then also looked at marble. Now, my parents had a lot of that in the 80s, for sure. In the bathroom, in the kitchen, tiles and work surfaces. But really didn't see anything bold enough. And then there was the geometric shapes and lines, which was all the rage in the 80s, arcading game world, that's for sure. Again, nothing really except this one. It had the boldness, it had the 3D lines, it had that effect that would come out from the furniture and it wouldn't swallow it up. So in the end, I went for this, and I am so pleased. It's exactly the look I wanted, and hopefully you'll agree. Now, I've been quite brave actually since doing this, and I've put another mural up. Now this is in the second bedroom, which I've never mentioned because I've got a lodger moving in and I didn't want to over rectify it. I wanted them to feel comfortable. So I put up a really nice forest theme. So let's go and take a look at that. And as you can see, it worked pretty well. And I've been using all the little tips that I just mentioned, and I'm pretty pleased with it. So it's definitely made me more confident to give it a go. So if you're considering it, do give it a go.
Okay, chaps, I think it's time for those special tips.
Well, here we go. The beginning. Now let me start by saying this isn't professional advice. Very much coming from the have a go beginner, which is the whole point of it really. Now, I definitely learned a lot from my mistakes. So when endeavouring to have a go yourself, which I highly recommend, is to do what I did first and watch a few videos of actual professionals doing it. And find one that resonates with you and then, well, give it a go. Because you're only ever going to learn from your own mistakes. Yeah, I know we've all heard that. So, I have got 8 tips that I can give you. The first one, is it the same batch? Now there's 2 reasons behind that. One is colour. It might have been at different times to different inks so it'll look different. And 2 is the paper. It might not be the same quality, so therefore it might stretch a little bit. So if you've got a repeat pattern, it might not line up. Now, I've practiced some more wallpapering since this, and I have come across that exact problem. But it hasn't really worried me too much. Now, what's so significant to this? As this was a one-off bespoke mural, so it was made specifically for this size wall, which is really cool and not as expensive as you think, especially for a feature like this. But if you're buying batches, because this only comes in one roll, it's worth checking the batch number. Tip number 2, let it lie out. Literally unroll 1 or 2 of the reels that you're actually using and let it roll out to get to room temperature. It's supposed to be overnight or something like that. I mean, depending on the quality of paper you got. But I would let it just lie out for an hour or so, just so it uncurls and it rests. So you don't have such a nightmare of getting it on the wall and staying on there without it peeling off, and it doesn't kind of shrink or grow. Tip number 3, paste the wall and not the paper. Now that had a huge uplift on my abilities to wallpaper because it doesn't get soggy, it isn't heavy with wallpaper paste and therefore falls on your head like you see in so many comedy sketch shows, even though it's the way my dad did it and my granddad before him. But I would recommend it because you've got so much more time to move it around once it's in position to get it lined up, and it's not soggy. It doesn't rip and tear and crease so much. Tip number 4, really push out the excess paste. Now you see so many guys, probably from the videos you've watched like me, they're there with the brush, but the old traditional way, getting it nice and flat. But if you've got a lot of paste on there, especially if you want a little bit of time to move it around, you really want to get rid of that excess paste because you won't notice it in the daytime. Now, there are some lumps up there. It looks great in the daytime, but now have a look at it at night. So now we've got the spotlights on. As we move around, out come those pesky little lumps. And again, once you get the right angle, out they pop. So you really want to keep on pressing out that paste all the time. Now, when it comes to the tools, you've got the traditional brush and the scraper thing. I've used both and they're both great for the job, so I recommend either. So I recommend definitely getting nice and close and having a look up and down at different angles to see if there are any lumps I need to get rid of. Tip number 5, get any paste on the wall or the ceiling, wipe it off immediately. Otherwise, you get little marks like this, or degradation, which is basically after about 3 months or longer, when everything's all packed away, you suddenly got yourself another DIY job because all of the paint is suddenly now peeling. Yeah, don't want to do that. Tip number 6, don't use so much paste. I really don't know why I didn't say that about 3 tips ago. Tip number 7, cutting the drops. Cutting the top and cutting the bottom. Now, I've got to confess, I never lost my so much than trying to do that. Now, I kind of equate it to apparently learning to fly a plane. The actual flying in the air is the easy bit. Like having the paper on the wall and moving it around, that's great. Landing and takeoffs are supposed to be the tricky part. The landings and the takeoffs. Now, I've used 3 methods of doing this. The knife, the little cutting wheel that you seem to get with most kits now, and a traditional pair of scissors. And without doubt, the one that I don't lose my so much with is definitely the scissors. Now, you do get a little bit of a tear effect with the scissors. You just perfect that over time, usually in doing one job like this. But trying to use the other ones, they just tear the paper. I'm just a beginner. I don't know any other way of doing it other than that. The more I do it, I'll probably get more clever at using those other little tools. But for now, I suggest sticking with the scissors. And finally, tip number 8, overlap. Now you see that line there? It's quite prominent. Well, that isn't the paper lining up the other paper. That is an actual overlap. And it's about 1 centimetre. Now this is only significant to murals. This is where you've got a little bit of a play in getting them to match up. Now, you're supposed to cut down when you've got that overlap lining up, peel one back, take off that strip, and then put the other one back on. This was my first one. I wasn't brave enough. I didn't do it. I was quite happy to just have the overlap there, which means there's a little bit of a lift, and you only really see it at night and under certain lights. Now, another reason why I felt so brave as that is because I knew the furniture I was putting in front of this. So I knew a lot of it was going to get hidden. So that's another little bit of advice rather than a tip, is don't worry so much about getting it perfect, because you know you're going to put things in front of it. Now let's talk furniture, because getting this mural, like I said at the beginning, was all behind the fact that it was going to make the furniture punch out, and in particular the dresser. Had to be mid-century, obviously, and I had a pretty good idea what it was, the look I definitely was going to go after. It's kind of that G-plan wood, for sure. Not G-plan, and my grandparents said that, I love it, but I didn't quite want that for myself. I knew it was going to be a cupboard at the bottom, it was going to have see-through shelves, it was going to be a little bit quirky, a little bit off-centre, the shelves. I was hoping to get one with a drop-down cabinet, either wooden or frosted glass, where you got all your drinks, glasses and stuff. And obviously you had the sliding glass display area. I was that specific. Now, I had a lot of options to look at, but then it came. Got it, seen it, loved it, and I purchased it. And it's here. And I am so pleased. It's not the best condition because I left it in the garage a little bit too long because the room wasn't quite ready for it. And garage isn't the same temperature or conditions as the room that you bring it in. So lesson learnt on that, it's a little bit of water damage. I'm not brave enough or skilled enough at the moment to challenge correcting it. It's something I probably will do, but at the moment I'm happy with it. I can live with it. Like I said, this is my studio, so I'm learning as I go. But if you're going to do that, heed my advice. Make sure that the room is ready for the furniture to go in, or where you're putting it into storage, that it's really kind of the same conditions or temperature as the room you're putting it in. Now, apart from the dresser, I always knew there was going to be another piece of furniture that was going to sit in front of this mural, and that is this chair. Or obviously not this specific chair at the time. It was more going to be a 70s kind of off-white creamy coloured chair, more banana shaped with like the matching stool. But I saw this one in Northamptonshire visiting a friend, and up there is quite a few really cool reclamation yards and retro crafty kind of vintage shops. Definitely going to go back up there again and make another video. But this one came up and I just fell in love with it. Obviously it swivels, and apart from the fact that it's the colour I want, a little bit off-white, it's got the shape of kind of space age. Space 1999 was huge for me, I thought of that. But it's also similar to Captain Kirk's chair. And I was actually lucky to sit in that very chair back in the early 90s when I was travelling in America and a Star Trek memorabilia show was in town. And yes, that really is all my own hair. I've got over it. Now, the journey of the chair coming home and into my little retro pad was a story in itself. It fitted in the car, I put it into the garage, not too long, learnt my lessons from the dresser on that one. Carried it around like a big helmet on my head to the front door when it was ready to come up. Lowered it down. Little did I know that it was a little bit too heavy for me. And it came down and hit one edge. It's a second-hand chair. I didn't know that the swivel mechanism actually wasn't that great. Hitting that edge, put too much pressure on one side, it snapped off. Great. Got a swivel chair that doesn't swivel. But I wasn't deterred. Flipped it upside down, undid the bracket where the mechanism was attached to, and took it to my local garage. They fix up cars, they've got welding equipment. So gave them the plate and the swivel mechanism. They welded it back on. In a week, 10, 15 pounds, here I am, back with the swivel chair again. And I love it. It's exactly how I wanted it to be. And that is it for this episode. So until next time, let me show you the feature wall and the furniture in its entirety, introduced in its own little retro way.
And that's all for us for now. So it's good night from me, and it's good night from him. Good night. Good night.
One more thing, sir.